Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Eric Smith? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I will look at the background of this case. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Eric Smith was born in Steuben County, New York, on January 22, 1980. In 1993, he lived with his parents in Savona, New York. This town of about 800 people is just under 2 hours south of Rochester. Eric had one older sister who had already moved away and one younger sister who lived in the residence with him. Eric had experienced various difficulties in his life. For example, he had speech problems. He threw temper tantrums during which he would bang his head on the floor. He was held back in school. On at least one occasion, he hit a tree with his hands. And Eric was targeted by bullies because he had eyeglasses, red hair, freckles, and ears which were low set on his head. Derek Roby was also a resident of Savona, New York. He was born on October 2, 1988. He lived with his parents, Dale and Doreen. Before moving to the timeline of the crime, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Factor. This busy fall season, you can count on Factor for fast, tasty meals that fit your lifestyle. Factor cuts out stressful meal planning and extensive preparation, so meals come together in minutes, taking the guesswork out of what to make for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Factor meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes, even faster than ordering takeout. In a wellness market full of unrealistic diet plans, Factor is a welcomed and new approach to prepared food. Factor meals include premium ingredients with integrity. After a long day of making videos, Factor is convenient. It allows me to prepare food quickly without compromising quality. Head to go.factor75.com/drgrande130 and use code drgrande130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. That's $130 off across 6 boxes at go.factor75.com/drgrande130 using the code drgrande130. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Monday, August 2, 1993, Derek was preparing to go to a recreation program in a nearby park. His mother, Doreen, was busy looking after Derek's brother and decided to allow Derek to walk alone to the park. This was the first time she had ever let him do this alone, but he was familiar with the trip, and it was only about a block away. Derek's mother watched as he started walking toward the park at 9:12 a.m. Derek was carrying his lunch in a canvas bag. Eric Smith was riding his bicycle in the area. He had just been to the park, where he repeatedly rammed his bicycle into a table containing people who he believed were annoying. Eric left the park and encountered Derek on McCoy Street. Eric knew who Derek was. They had met before at the recreation program. However, Eric would later claim that he had never met Derek before. Eric Smith decided that he wanted to take Derek Roby someplace and hurt him. He called out to Derek saying, "Hey kid," which prompted Derek to turn around. Eric asked Derek if he wanted to take a shortcut to the recreation program. Derek responded by saying he was not supposed to, but Eric pressed the issue, saying, "It's okay, I'm right here." Eric took Derek into a secluded area behind a hedgerow, put his bicycle down, and allowed Eric to walk ahead of him. Eric then came up behind Derek and choked him with his right arm. Derek dropped his lunch bag, kicked his feet, and waved his arms in an effort to escape. Eric Smith then started choking Derek with his hands. After about 30 seconds, Derek was no longer resisting. Eric assumed that he had killed him. Eric grabbed the lunch bag and dumped out its contents. He smashed a banana. He took a paper napkin and stuffed it in Derek's mouth. He also attempted to put a plastic bag in Derek's mouth, but Derek bit his finger. At this time, Eric picked up a small rock and struck Derek in the head 3 times. He picked up a large rock and, using both hands, threw it into Derek's head 3 times. He then picked up another large rock and threw it onto Derek's torso 3 times. Eric took red Kool-Aid from Derek's lunch and poured it over his face before using a stick to commit an offense of a sexual nature. Eric Smith left the scene after dragging Derek's body onto a pile of rocks. About 5 minutes later, Eric returned to the scene. He wanted to make sure that Derek was dead. At about 11 a.m., Derek's mother went to the park after a thunderstorm hit the area. She was told that Derek never arrived. She notified the police and reported him missing. The police found his body at around 3:45 p.m. They determined the cause of death to be blunt trauma to the head with contributing asphyxia. 3 days after the murder, on August 5, Eric Smith's mother brought him to the police command post, believing that he might have helpful information. Eric told the police that he had been in and out of the park 3 or 4 times on the morning of August 2, but he did not see Derek. With the permission of his parents, the police visited Eric's home at about 5 p.m. and interviewed him for about 50 minutes. They wanted to clear up some discrepancies in Eric's account. Eric changed his story at this time. He said that he had seen Derek on the morning of August 2. Derek was walking on the opposite side of the street. The location that Eric described was near the crime scene. Eric offered an accurate and detailed description of Derek's clothing and his lunch bag. The police were suspicious about Eric's story. He told them that his glasses had been broken several weeks earlier and he couldn't see too well. This didn't appear to match Eric's account of seeing so many details about Derek's appearance. When confronted with this discrepancy, Eric said, "You think I killed him, don't you?" Eric's great-grandfather asked the police to leave, which they did. They returned at about 7 p.m. and assured Eric's great-grandfather that they were not accusing Eric, rather just trying to collect information. The police convinced the family members to allow Eric to participate in a reenactment on McCoy Street. Eric stood where he said he was standing on August 2. A police officer stood across the street where Derek had been standing, according to Eric's account. Eric was only able to make out the outline of the police officer. He was not able to see any details. It was getting dark outside, so all the parties returned the next day to facilitate another reenactment. Maybe the darkness was affecting Eric's vision. In the daylight, Eric still had problems seeing the police officer. The police interviewed Eric for 2 hours at the command post. Eric made it seem as though he wasn't sure about seeing Derek after all. Maybe he did not see him that day. On August 8, Eric informed his family members that he murdered Derek. The family members turned him in to the authorities. The police interviewed Eric. They advised him of his right to remain silent and his right to have an attorney present during questioning. Eric proceeded to answer questions. He provided the police with a detailed account of the homicide. In September of 1993, Eric was indicted on a single count of murder in the second degree. He was tried in July and August 1994 and found guilty. Eric was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison, which was the maximum considering his age. Eric was denied parole in 2002. During his parole hearing in 2004, he said that strangling Derek gave him a good feeling. Not surprisingly, he was denied parole. In 2009, a few months before parole hearing number 5 in 2010, Eric said that when he murdered Derek, he did not see him, rather he saw a bully. His parole was denied. On October 5, 2021, Eric had his 11th parole hearing. It was approved. He remained in prison for several months until housing could be located in Queens, New York, so the authorities were not going to return him to the town of Savona. Eric was released on February 1, 2022. He will be on parole for the remainder of his life. Now moving to my analysis. There is no question that Eric Smith actually killed Derek Roby in reality. But was Eric criminally responsible? Was he guilty according to the legal standard? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that Eric was guilty, starting with the inculpatory evidence. Eric confessed to the murder, and his confession matched the physical evidence at the crime scene. Mental health clinicians testifying for the state argued that Eric understood the difference between right and wrong. Eric had no history of extreme aggression. Furthermore, the clinicians determined that Eric was sadistic. Even a clinician testifying for the defense admitted that Eric was sadistic. If Eric did not know what he was doing, why did he take his victim to a secluded place? Why would it matter to Eric if somebody saw his actions? If Eric could not control his actions, how was he able to wait until getting his victim alone to commit the murder? If Eric was unable to appreciate the consequences of his behavior, why did he return to the scene to make sure that his victim wasn't going to be talking to anyone? When Eric told the police about what Derek was wearing and about how Derek was carrying a lunch bag, the police said that Eric was bouncing around and happy, as if he enjoyed reliving the experience. During that same interview, he threw red Kool-Aid on the ground. Red Kool-Aid was the drink thrown over Derek's body. To be fair, this particular piece of evidence could be explained by an overabundance of Kool-Aid in the area. If they had given Eric a different drink, he would have thrown that instead. Now moving to the exculpatory evidence. Even the state did not deny that the bullying Eric sustained was repeated and severe. Eric Smith's defense argued that he was not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect. A mental health clinician testified that Eric had dysthymic disorder and intermittent explosive disorder. Eric was not able to understand or appreciate the nature and consequences of his actions and was not able to control his rage. When considering the evidence, do I think that Eric Smith was guilty? Yes. It appears as though he did understand the difference between right and wrong. Now moving to my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. If Eric had not confessed, it's not clear if this case would have ever been solved. The police had interviewed over 500 people and were not enjoying any success. One of the residents of the town came up with the idea that the killer must have hated bananas because a banana belonging to the victim had been smashed at the crime scene. This, of course, makes no sense. Who would hate bananas? They're delicious. Either way, when anti-banana sentiment is introduced into a case as a possible clue that could find the perpetrator, it is clear the investigation has stalled. I think it's likely that Eric Smith would have killed again. If he was arrested for any subsequent murder, he may have confessed at that time to Derek's murder, so the murder could have been solved through that mechanism eventually. But of course that would come at the cost of more human life. Item number 2. During his parole hearings, Eric Smith's central argument was that he was a changed man. When he was young, he did not value life, he did not trust anyone, and he felt as though the world was against him. In prison, he learned to value life. Eric claimed that he didn't initially intend to kill Derek, rather he made that decision after attacking him. Eric's explanation is consistent with this idea that he attacked Derek in order to have someone he could victimize. Eric was bullied for several years, and this was his chance to be the bully. None of this explains the sexual component of Eric's crime, which brings me to item number 3. During his parole hearings, Eric did not take responsibility for his behavior with the stick. He admitted to using the stick, but suggested this was in an effort to kill his victim by striking his heart with the stick. The parole board members even questioned Eric on this bizarre and really just about unbelievable explanation, yet ultimately they still released him without getting a satisfactory answer. I think what may have happened is that during his time in prison, Eric learned what he needed to say to convince the parole board to release him. He had all the time in the world to craft a message that would appear sympathetic. Even still, he was not willing to own all of his behavior. Item number 4. Eric was diagnosed with dysthymic disorder and intermittent explosive disorder. Dysthymic disorder is now referred to as persistent depressive disorder. This is like a low-grade depression, which tends to stay around for a long time. This is different than something like major depressive disorder, which features episodes of depression and periods of time when depressive symptoms are absent or less pronounced. Persistent depressive disorder is not associated with violence. Intermittent explosive disorder, however, has a strong association with violence. Let's take a look at the criteria for this disorder. A person who is at least 6 years old has recurrent behavioral outbursts which represent a failure to control aggressive impulses. The definition has specific rules for what qualifies as a behavioral outburst. For example, 3 outbursts causing damage in a 12-month period would qualify. The aggressiveness is disproportionate to any provocation or stressors. The outbursts are not premeditated and have no tangible objective. The outbursts cause marked distress and are not better explained by other disorders like major mood disorders, personality disorders, or psychotic disorders. Intermittent explosive disorder does not explain Eric's behavior. His actions were premeditated, and sexual contact was almost certainly his objective. This brings me to item number 5. The available evidence about this case suggests that Eric killed based on a desire for sexual domination, and that it's likely he would have killed again if he had not been arrested. Everyone who evaluated Eric agreed that he was sadistic. This trait has a strong association with antisocial behavior, including bullying and murder. It is believed that sadism, like every personality trait, has both a genetic and environmental etiology. Therefore, it's possible that Eric's experiences with bullies contributed to the development of sadism. This brings me to item number 6, which is the cost of bullying. Eric Smith frequently reported the activity of people who were bullying him. In response to being admonished, they would stop for about a week, then resume their behavior. To the extent those bullies contributed to Eric's antisocial behavior, they share responsibility in his actions. Moving to my final item, number 7. Should Eric Smith have been released? Regardless of where his sadism came from, the risk to society remains the same. It's like if antisocial people manufactured an explosive, that doesn't make the explosive any less dangerous. It worries me that Eric never really accepted full responsibility for his crime or adequately explained why he did it. Even still, Eric was convicted of second-degree murder, he was never charged with first-degree murder, and was only 13 when he committed his crime. It does make sense that he should have been released eventually, especially considering that adults convicted of second-degree murder can sometimes be released. This case represents a challenging situation that doesn't have a satisfactory conclusion no matter what happened. If he stayed in prison, that doesn't seem completely reasonable, but being released doesn't seem completely reasonable either. What does seem clear in this case is that the authorities should never stop watching Eric Smith. They need to monitor his behavior carefully for the rest of his life. Those are my thoughts in the case of Eric Smith. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.